a choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expounding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. Get your childhood-like wonder hats on for this one, guys, because on this episode we have Larry Pahl. He is the director of the American Institute of Pyramid Research. Guys, he has done some incredible work on the Giza Plateau with the pyramids, with the Fibonacci sequence, the God number. He's made some incredible discoveries independent of mainstream Egyptology research. He kind of pulls from all avenues there. He's very eclectic in his words about his research. He is fascinating, guys. You will love this episode. For more about this show in particular, check out expandingrealitypodcast.com. Go check out the link to the YouTube, which will be directly on that website, our website, and then you can see the video here. He does some presentation work with some visual aids, so make sure that you guys check that out for the full experience. Guys, without any further ado, Larry Pahl. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us the director of the American Institute of Pyramid Research, Larry Pahl. How are you today, Mr. Pahl?
Hey, I'm doing great. Glad to be with you, Brandon.
This is so cool. I've been looking at your work, man. You have a wonderful YouTube. I will link, of course, all of the ways to find you down in the show notes here so everybody can take a look at and get as excited about your research as I have been. So tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll launch into the meaty stuff, man.
Well, I basically have a teaching background, but when I was teaching, I would tell my high school and my college students, I taught both at the high school and college level, and they would inevitably start laughing when I talked about another job I had, because I do not have a straight line resume. I've been a carpenter, a mason, a bouncer at a bar. I've been a corporate, almost vice president. I was director of marketing for a major corporation. I've sold stocks and bonds. It goes on and on. It's hard to believe, you could pack this much in. They'd always laugh. So, to bypass that long list of things, it's like once 37 jobs I held or something. And again, you'd think a guy's a ne'er-do-well with a resume like that. You got fired from I could have positive references from almost everybody. So it's just my life worked out that way. And so, the teaching, when I basically retired from that, I went into what I've always been doing. I've back in the infancy of the internet, I had 1 million hits on my page about the Great Pyramid. I have greatpyramid.org. I have greatpyramid.us. I have these top level domain names because I was early on. I was like the only guy in the Great Pyramid in the very beginning. Then I left it to do my teaching career, basically, have come back to it, and the internet changed radically in the 20 years I did a lot of teaching and stuff. But I put myself fully, the same way I did into my teaching, into what had been my avocation the whole time I was teaching, which is the Great Pyramid in ancient Egypt. So now I'm, when I was teaching, I was always teaching someone else's curriculum. I taught political science at the college level. I was a social studies and history teacher at the high school level. So I was always teaching somebody else's curriculum. And I enjoyed the stuff I taught. Now I'm really into, I've hit the stride of my life, the fulfillment of my calling. I'm studying daily, full-time, leading tours, doing research in Egypt and the mysteries of ancient Egypt. So that's me.
This is so cool. And I'll link how to book a tour with you. My wife and I are going to join you on one of those one time, I promise. So
that'd be great, yeah.
With your well-rounded background, though, it sounds like all of it's played a bit of a role into how you approach the work. If nothing else, the work ethic required to obtain the skills that you had before your calling or your true work that you're doing now. I think it's also interesting that you were a carpenter. I do a little woodworking myself, and the masonry work that you did as well. How much of the lens of your physical working with your hands background do you apply to how you view the way that the pyramids were constructed?
Well, I became friendly with Mark Lehner. He's probably the most famous Egyptologist on Giza. He's spent 40 years of his life there. He went there as an Edgar Cayce, spiritual fanatic, and ended up getting a PhD and becoming the most forensic scientist you can imagine. The alternative community always slaps me when you're friendly with Zahi Hawass. I did tour with Zahi Hawass in 2014 and 2015. We reopened up tourism in Egypt. I've been, a friend with Mark Lehner anyway. And I've made presentations at 2 Egyptological conferences, and at one of them, Mark Lehner went out of his way to tell me what a good job I did. So because I can talk, with ease about those major, the voices of the mainstream, I'm always vilified by those who insist it's an us versus them. But I'm very eclectic. I also study all the alternative channels. And I believe that while I respect the forensic base for Mark Lehner and the archaeologists in a way that the alternatives don't respect, I also am open to other penetrations of reality besides typical forensic research. For instance, it used to be said that theology was the queen of the sciences. So I'll look at theological content. I'll look at esoteric content. I'll look at ancient esoteric symbols and things. So I'm not stuck with forensic science, but I believe it's a basis for the first level of findings. So
it's fascinating, and I definitely want to get into alternate history versus what's going on now with Egyptology, because there is.
Well, then, excuse me for interrupting, Brandon, because let me go back. I just changed the subject of that. Let me just finish that by saying, so the hands-on that you asked about. The thing that I learned, Mark Lehner was sitting in the session of Dr. Doug Inglis. He was getting a PhD, and he was making a presentation at RC to a filled audience about his findings for 4th Dynasty boat building. So he's presenting slides about the bottom, for instance, of the Khufu ship, which just yesterday, as you probably saw, was moved
that. It was beautiful.
Its home in Giza to its new site at the Gem, and they made a big procession out of that. So, he was talking about that vessel and other vessels from the 4th Dynasty. And he showed how the wood was put together like a jigsaw puzzle, not like going to Home Depot and buying 2x4s and building a modular boat. This was handcrafted. And Mark Lehner stood up at the question and answer session, never had met Dr. Doug Inglis before, and said, what you are finding about 4th Dynasty boats is the same thing I've been finding for 40 years about the masonry of the pyramids at Giza. So Mark Lehner was saying, I've noticed by all my study, 40 years, no man has studied the Giza Plateau more than him, that he's seen the hand of craftsmen, Egyptian craftsmen. One of the questions that was asked of Doug Inglis when I heard him give a different presentation at the Oriental Institute, the greatest stash of Egyptology in America, basically, at the University of Chicago, I heard him give a talk there. And an engineer asked him a question after he talked about 4th Dynasty boat building. He said, were there schools of engineering in ancient Egypt? And Dr. Doug Inglis said, no, father taught son. So think about that. You can study 4 years at a university here in America, learn a lot of things, but how much more could you learn if your father and his father before him and his father before him worked with it every day, and they taught you and they taught you and they taught you? And so that made me realize, when hearing Doug Inglis give that answer to that engineer's question, the tremendous knowledge you could gain, the hands-on knowledge of how to do things. And I see that all over Giza. It's one of the things I use to argue against the alternatives who insist, that it couldn't have been done. That they had a tremendous artisan skill in rope making, in stone making, in engineering water, irrigating fields. They just show tremendous, hands-on intelligence.
I like the wisdom that's involved in these kind of things getting passed down, because you look at this with tanning hides or something with the Native American traditions, with bead making, with things like tool making, things like this. These are crafts that are handed down. Now, there's a couple schools of thought on this as well. And like I said, I definitely want to get into alternative theories with you. One of them would be that that they were so abundant that you can only do this. The Göbekli Tepe argument, that they could only build such a thing if they had architecture or agriculture, if they had a well-to-do society where they had time to spend on this. If you're not trying to survive constantly, then you have time to learn these skills and then to pass them on and to create these incredible monoliths that we see. I also want to talk to you about high civilization. I've got so many questions for you, I'll be honest. So, but if you don't mind, let's launch into some of your work here, man. So tell me about the trial passage.
Okay, so let me just show visually while I talk about some things here.
Yeah, and let me mention this while you are pulling that up. For our audio-only audience, he has some wonderful slides and a presentation that he's put together. Go to YouTube. It will be linked in the show notes below so that you guys can check that out and get the full glory of Larry's presentation here.
Okay, so let me start by, let's see, just to give you a look at the trial passages here. Let's see. Okay, right here. So, and those listening could still, pick up on this. But okay, so this it's a picture of me. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. So
the way that you look next to that thing, people forget how huge that thing is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is huge. But the horse's foot is in what's called the trench. It's sometimes called the third trial passage by Egyptologists. Okay. So 14 royal cubits to its west there's the entrance to the trial passages. There's the well shaft of the trial passages, and here's the exit. Now, here's what entrance and exit are. The trial passages are an exact replica of the passages 100 yards to the east in the Great Pyramid. Egyptologists believe the trial passages were built by Flinders Petrie believed that it was built by the same people that built the Great Pyramid. So just like if you're standing on the east side of the Great Pyramid, Brandon, you just mentioned how massive it is. You're looking at it. Where do you find the key when you're looking at a big map of the world? You find the key in the lower right. That's exactly where the trial passages are. They are a key. The builders left the key to the Great Pyramid, one of many. And so the entrance to the trial passage is an exact replica of the entrance to the Great Pyramid, 100 yards to the west, because the trial passages are 100 yards to the east. I've been at the you can't, they now have a law. It's 30 days in jail minimum if you climb the pyramid. Well, like a lot of people, have climbed up to the original entrance. They blow the whistle on the ground. They tell you to come down. Now you don't want to do it. It's really dangerous. But I got permission from the director of the pyramids, Ashraf, to climb up there one time. And I was there recently when I had a private entrance to the Great Pyramid. And so I've been up there. And again, the trial passages are a replica of that original entrance at the 19th course. And the exit point is where the passages inside the Great Pyramid go into the Grand Gallery. If you look at the trial passage exit, they're an exact mimic of the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. So here on the Giza Plateau, where you don't have to go inside the pyramid, climb up, is a replica. The passages are the same sides. They're just shortened by 1/5. So they're a 1/5 replica in another way. They're a life-size replica in width and height in the other way. And so I made a presentation at a huge Egyptological conference about my work studying the trial passages, showing what ways they could be a key. As a matter of fact, I published a YouTube video today. Let me just show parts of the presentation I made there. So the YouTube video I published today about the Great Pyramid shows where the trial passages are. But what I show about it is that here's a view right here. So you can see that let me just show this here. The trial passages in the trench. There's the trial passages. There's the trench that I showed you called the third trial passage. It's an exact mimic of the central line of the Great Pyramid and the line that the passages are in, the first ascending passage, the Grand Gallery. And so if you move those over, you would have the Great Pyramid laid out over the top of the trial passages. In other words, again, it's just showing the trial passages are an exact mimic of the Great Pyramid. So I'll stop sharing the screen there now. So one of the things, Mark Foster has done some work on this. Okay, we know that Al-Mamun chopped into the Great Pyramid in the year 820 AD. That's the entrance everybody goes into today. Nobody goes in the original entrance. It's too narrow, it's small, it's closed off. You can't get. So it's this big gash into the Great Pyramid that goes directly into the passage system. Well, people never stop to ask, well, how did Al-Mamun just happen to go exactly to the one point that's going to lead him up to the ground? Well, Mark Foster says you could anciently get down and go up through the well shaft and find what was in the king's chamber. But if you found something big like the lid to the sarcophagus, which is not there, it wouldn't fit back through the well shaft. Oh, but if you went down and chopped your way out, straight out. And so Mark Foster says Alma Moon's Passage wasn't chopped by him in 820 going in because his spies found a thing they could get out. The sarcophagus was too big to get out, but the lid, which is not up in the king's chamber, he says they chiseled out. And so that the passage that everyone now goes into the Great Pyramid in the Alma Moon entrance on, I think, the 9th course was constructed by going out, not by going in. And Mark Foster says that Alma Moon probably knew about the trial passages. There's a scored line in the trial passages that's also in the Great Pyramid. Those that have studied the pyramid know that in the entrance passage, the beginning of the descending passage, is a scored line, a very distinct scored line that some say pointed to the Pleiades at the time that the pyramid was built. And that scored line is in the trial passages too. So Mark Foster says Alma Moon measured how far it was in the trial passages, then extrapolated by the scale, and that's how he knew where to go in terms of finding exactly where that point was. So the trial passages are a key that way to the Great Pyramid. The thing that I added today in the video that I did, besides the trial passages being a key to the Great Pyramid in ways like I just said, there's other ways besides the one I just gave. The last time I was there, I did what's become one of the things that's my trademark of research now, the lines that are on the plateau. Because I've had some hassle from the Egyptian authorities up in the pyramid, I thought, they've taken film from me before and stuff. I'm the real Indiana Jones. I'm not a fictional character. And so I thought, they let me do things on the Giza Plateau. Well, there's all kinds of markings on the Giza Plateau that were put there by the same people that built the Great Pyramid. So I started to study the lines on the Great Pyramid and realized there's a language there. And so some of the lines there have shown me all kinds of things. And so what I did was I did the same thing to the trial passages. There are some lines through the trial passages. Let me, I'll just show you, Brandon, you can see that. We don't show it on the screen, but the point is, if you look at the trial passage, you see there's some cuts across it, the same way I see cuts all through the Giza Plateau. All I did was simply measure those. I measured those cuts and the angle. Then I simply went home to Google Earth and put the angles I had found in the trial passages. And what I found, it's unbelievable. It points to the southwest border of the Menkaure Pyramid. It points to the southeast corner of the Khafre Pyramid. It points to the southeast corner of the mortuary temple of Khafre's pyramid. And it points to the Lahoun Pyramid, the 12th dynasty Renaissance pyramid that's down in the Fayum Oasis. It points directly to that. And so these pointings, which just seem to be these random marks that are on the trial passages, it's showing me the trial passages are a key, not just to the Great Pyramid, it's a key to larger Giza. And what I end my YouTube video with today is you've got to explain the unitary construction that's at Giza. This is not three competing pharaohs. My pyramid's bigger than your pyramid, because the whole history of the world is that. Napoleon, the Caesars, the whole history of the world is, Trump is the leaders, fighting everybody else. What's the chances of Trump getting along with Clinton, or Obama? It's not going to happen. Well, look at these pharaohs. These pyramids are all in unison. This is not the normal story of the world of incredibly ambitious pharaohs battling each other. My pyramid is bigger than yours. There's a tremendous unity here. And the trial passages showed me that by pointing, I never knew this before, not just to the Great Pyramid, to the whole Giza Plateau, and even down to Lahoun. Something's going on that needs greater explanation.
God, I love your work. You're fascinating. I just have to say that. I love everything about this. And yes, you have to look at it like, well, Khufu's brother wanted to build this ostentatious type gaudy thing, but everybody was like, no, ma'am, toe the line. Let's keep it uniform. Let's keep it. It's almost like they had like an HOA or something back then. Kind of like a standard in which, like, if you leave your trash cans out, if you build your pyramid different, you get fined. So I love it.
I learned by presenting at Egyptological conferences, I really don't hover around, the traditionalists. But to me, I'm doing all you other alternatives. Why don't you do what I did? Why don't you write a paper and submit it to Egyptologists? Because you're always talking about the mainstream doesn't accept this. Well, publish something that's legitimate so that they have something to look at. So I did that. And when I went to these Egyptological conferences, now I'm in a group of people I'm not normally with, Egyptologists. I learned about their culture by listening. And one thing I learned, it was a guy from the University of Chicago was talking about what they called the Giza exception. The things you're talking about are this ordered system of tombs, the Eastern Field, the Western Field on Giza. You have a type of HOA, like you talked about, that doesn't exist other places. They called it the Khufu exception. So that taught me a lot without studying Egyptology, knowing that they called it the Khufu exception, that what we see at Giza is not the normal thing you find in Egypt, but it is there. It is there, because what you find elsewhere is probably more, my pyramid's bigger than your pyramid. It's the old ancient thing that's the history of the world, ambitious kings fighting ambitious kings, but you've got the Khufu exception.
It's so interesting, man. And like I said, I want to get into some alternative history stuff with you and how uniform it seems that a global civilization was, but let's save that for just a minute. I also like how you're utilizing technology to discover new things about the pyramids that we did not know before, the interconnectivity of Giza and everything else around it. You also find this with LiDAR, and where they're using laser radar over the Amazon to discover undiscovered entire complexes of Mayan tombs and cities. It's fascinating to me, the integration of these two things, especially how you go down on the field, make measurements, angles, and everything, because those angles would just scale. They're scalable. So whenever you go home and use technology to find this, it's fascinating to me. And you're making new discoveries out of modern technology from something ancient that there are such massive controversies and mysteries surrounding just the existence of the pyramids, the Great Pyramids especially, but then the complex that's found globally. I mean, you talk about the things that are found in the Amazon as well, pyramids, Teotihuacan, Peru, Cusco, and the way that you talked about the shipbuilding, that is also another thing that you find with stones in the Amazon as well. Again, in Peru, you find these, they look like the blocks have been melted and poured into place. The angles and the way that they make these things, it's incredible to me, and not a lot of people do know about the uniform construction or kind of the interlockingness about the bricks or the blocks used in the Great Pyramid as well. Do you mind just talking a little bit about how they fit together? How would they have constructed something so huge like that?
Well, I'm going to actually answer this from the angle you weren't expecting, because I just recently watched a video of a German video of a guy who climbed the pyramid in 8 minutes. People don't realize, the slope angle of the Great Pyramid is 51 degrees, but the Eris angle on the edge is 42 degrees. So if you're smart, you climb on the edge because it's 10 degree less angle. And so he climbed on the edge. He probably knew that. And so he's got a GoPro on, obviously, because the footage, you're hearing him breathe, but you don't see him. You see the stones as he's going up. And it reminded me, as he was near the top, that Flinders Petrie said, the top third or more of the Great Pyramid is sloppy work. And he thought maybe there was a different, taskmaster, a different architect or engineer that took over for the work. And Peter James wrote a book, I think, called Saving the Pyramids. He's the guy the Egyptian government hired to renovate the pyramids, like the Step Pyramid, for years had the scaffolding on it. Now it's this pristine, beautiful thing. You don't see the scaffolding. Peter James is the guy behind that. So Peter James has an inside look at the pyramids more than anybody else, because he's the one renovating them. And in his book, Saving the Pyramids, he talks about basically, that you can conclude how they built it. It's not what everybody thinks. There's a lot of fill probably in the Great Pyramid. They did a real good job of making the outside tight, but then there was a lot of inner fill and stuff. And the fact that the top, since there doesn't seem to be anything of importance at the top, there's probably some hidden passages where the void is, but there's still a whole bunch of the pyramid above that. So they didn't have to be as good. The point, I think part of the Great Pyramid being built so big was, if they had the intelligence, they could have left this in a little crystal chip this big, all the revelation that's in the Great Pyramid. They could have put into a, much smaller than a memory stick you stick in a computer. They could have put all the knowledge at the Great Pyramid. Everybody says it's so amazing. How did they do that? They could have given it to us that way. Why didn't they? Because it wouldn't draw the attention of the biggest monument on the earth, that's only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. That draws people there. And so they chose to hit it that way. They probably, I think, before the flood, they were probably splitting the atom. The technology from the ancient past is so tremendous. They could have given it to us in a way that other, like a caveman, big building of stone. Like, what is that? So the point is, the Great Pyramid's not the narrative you just gave, which is fairly common. Oh, Flinders Petrie says one where it's like the workmanship of a jeweler on the scale of acres. So you hear things like that and you think, oh, you can't fit a paper through some of the joints. Well, you can fit a whole book through some of the joints. Some of the joints are so sloppy and stuff. So the point is, it seems that's part of their intelligence. They knew what to make strong on the anatomy to make it stay what it is, but the top being so crappy. And again, just look at the guy's video going up. You can see, the sloppy work that's up there. Read Flinders Petrie if you don't want to watch the 8-minute video of the recent guy that climbed it. And so that's the first thing I'd say to what you're saying. It's the contrary narrative to how the parts of it that are really just use ingenuity to get it up there big and strong. As a matter of fact, when they say, one of the things the people argument that the ancient high-tech people use where it couldn't have been built by Khufu because you would have had to lay a block like every second for 20 years or something. No, that's based on the calculation of Wikipedia. Everybody says there's 2.3 million blocks in the Great Pyramid. No, there's not. There's not that many blocks in there. There isn't, and a lot of them are just, the average size is much smaller. The bottom ones are so big, you led to believe if you calculated the number of blocks it would be in the Great Pyramid based on the large ones that are at the bottom, you'd probably get like 700,000. The ones on the bottom are huge. They're huge. And so you look at that, you figure the whole pyramid's like that. And only the bottom two courses are huge like that. The 35th is a little bit bigger. Some of the other courses, they sort of vary. There's a whole science and revelation in that about the varying widths of the courses that I could go into. Academic papers have been written about it too. But the point is that there's a lot less than 2.3 million. And so you don't, and if you Peter James inside the pyramid, a lot of fill in there, you don't need all those years to explain this perfect. You can't even put a piece of paper through the crack. Oh, yes, you can. And a whole bunch of them, but some of them you can. So they showed, in answer to your question now, they showed that they had a tremendous ability to sharpen the sides of limestone like it was steel and fit together two huge limestone blocks where there's almost you can't even fit a piece of paper between there. Yes, they showed they had that capability, but that's not throughout the pyramid. That's the point.
I love it. And you're right. If there are much less blocks in it, then that would alter the timeline. That would make it more plausible that the Egyptian culture itself was just that advanced, that they could maintain and construct these types of things within a reasonable time frame, because that's the argument, exactly like what you just said. The amount of blocks, if you're taking it as a solid structure, minus the voids and cavities on the inside, but then also that they were using, these copper chisels, and it was just a lot of people like to say that they were just too primitive, and that's why you get the aliens and stuff like that. I know you're a big proponent that it was built by aliens, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So it seems that with all the advancements with science, with the new way that we're going, with all the answers that we're getting with this kind of stuff, do you find that there's any solid answers that will kind of unify all of these theories? Because there seems to be such disparate examples in history, in geology, with the work of Robert Schoch, which I definitely want to talk to you about, Dr. Anthony West and Robert Schoch here in a minute, what they did with the Sphinx. But with all of this, do you think that there will finally be a unified idea about how these things were built, or do you think that the ancients just built them to be mysterious?
Well, I'm working on a video right now. I recently had a little communication with Ben from Uncharted X, and he's one of the leaders in the ancient high-tech movement. And I'm trying to bring together the two different viewpoints. Ben and those guys always refer to the mainstream. He had Graham Hancock, as a matter of fact. He did like an hour program with Graham Hancock, who's definitely the grandfather, the patriarch of the alternative people. And so Graham mentioned a bunch of times just the other day in that interview, the mainstream. And so I'm looking at the mainstream and the arguments that I heard Graham Hancock and Ben just make. And I'm trying to put those together to show what I think is a real resolution. But my answer to your question is no, I don't think there'll be, because they won't like my resolution. I do think it resolves exactly all the words that are said. I really do. I think I'll show that I can resolve the words, but they still won't buy it. So no, just because of the limitation of human personality, it won't be able to be done, and the different perceptions that people have. But I I'm going to do my part to try and show what resolution can be brought there, because I do consider myself in the middle, not in the middle, but I'm eclectic. So I'll draw from anywhere. I'll draw from anywhere where somebody's expressing meaning. I'll listen, and I don't think we have to immediately default to hate. It's like it's an us versus them. Okay, like for instance, I told Ben, I've been with Chris Dunn, who's one of the academic leaders, because he's written a couple books, textbooks. I lived in Illinois. I don't now. I live in Tennessee now, but he lived in Illinois. I said, let's get together, Chris. I spent a day with him. We had a nice time. We have totally different views. Yusuf Awan, he goes with all those guys. NEXT. He's always, his dad was a leader of the ancient Kemet school and stuff. I invited him, Yusuf, into the Great Pyramid. Last time I paid for a private entrance, and I let him talk to my people. We have completely different views. So the point is, I got along with Yusuf, I got along with Chris Dunn. We don't have to hate each other just because we have different views. It's like, get over that. What is that? That is so old school. What do yeah, it's old school, but it's still what the world runs on, so it's unfortunate that there has to be this, okay, I got a different opinion. So now that we established that, let's keep talking.
I love this, because you're not on team Chris Dunn, you're not on team Zahi Hawass, you're on team Larry Pahl, and you pull from all of these ideas, which I think is wonderful. And it seems to be that a lot of people like Graham Hancock, which I love his work. I love his America Before. He does a wonderful job. He's got some very interesting perspectives, especially on timelines of like the end of the Younger Dryas with Randall Carlson. They do a lot of work on this with the giant impact theory, which again relates to the age of the Sphinx, which is very interesting. So with all of this stuff going on with your research in particular, what are some of the elements that you were able to say, you know what, the established or the mainstream, in air quotes, as they've called it, and then some of these alternative theories, where does the Venn diagram overlap that you have found?
That both sides don't see something. Okay, so yeah, I just heard, Graham and them, okay, why doesn't, the mainstream see our side? Well, here's their side. These tool marks means there had to be an ancient technology. But what Mark Lehner said, I heard him mention he's from North Dakota, so some small TV station interviewed their hero returned home. So it was a small circulation TV interview that Mark Lehner had up in North Dakota. But he said, he mentioned Graham Hancock, Robert Bauval, Robert Schoch. He mentioned their names and saying that they're challenged him. He says, the thing is, I don't find that. In other words, I've sifted more sand in Giza than anybody else. And he uses to me, the boring, slow moving, but still very scientifically respectable, sifting through every bit of sand. And we label this little coin we got and we put it in a box over here. He's gone through everything. And you know what? I don't find any evidence for what you guys are talking about.
Even with the water erosion on the Sphinx, the enclosure?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about where they say that these markings, like a drill hole in granite, means there had to be ancient high technology.
But didn't they find drill bits?
No, they've not found drill bits. What
in was the sense Chris Dunn talking about the drill bit with actual scoring going around it? Because I have seen a presentation.
Well, yeah, you need to watch. I hate to say it, to watch Alan on Sacred Geometry Decoded. He has a video about Chris Dunn core claim, and he shows how he just as a layman in Australia, he went to some granite guys. Give me some granite. They're making fun of of how you guys can't do this. And he showed how he could get granite perfectly level himself, not by his father wasn't a mason. He's not a mason. By 2 weeks of doing this, he was able to drill core holes like Chris Dunn says could only be done with high-tech tools or something. He does very simply in the means available to ancient. So it's a great debunking of that whole idea. And I hate to say that to Chris, but I'm sorry, I listened to Sacred Geometry Decoded. So in other words, you can draw different conclusions about what those marks indicate. Oh, those had to be diamond technology. Those had to be a modern lathe press or something. And Sacred Geometry Decoded says no. So you can do that by hand now. So,
It's another interesting argument with it because everybody always says, or you hear a ubiquitous term saying that we couldn't do this today. You know, that's one of the big things. We couldn't even do it with all of our modern technology. Well, maybe it's not the technology that was the issue. Maybe it's the technique. It was the knowledge. It was the skill.
Well, it's not the technique. I just said that in response to one of these videos. I said, people say we couldn't build the Great Pyramid today. Are you serious? We could totally build the Great Pyramid today. We're just not going to because there's no money in it.
Right.
We build the Sears Tower because there's a bunch of commercial real estate sold in there. We build a building because there's the Dubai Tower. You think, of course, they made money on that. The amount of cost to live in there. So building the Great Pyramid wouldn't bring any money, so we wouldn't build it. Then that says something about the Egyptians because you know what? They didn't make any money on it either. I mean, there was no money to be made. They did it out of love and fear of the pharaoh and the god. I mean, it was like an act of, it's like a way we don't live. We don't live in daily, like, look at the Egyptian prayers. They're constantly thinking, you know, what's my life like in the overall scheme of making it to the next life? You know, their whole thing about mummy, their whole societal focus was on the next life. Ours isn't. Look at the 10 o'clock news.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they built the Great Pyramid. We would to say we couldn't is ridiculous. Really? Are you going to say that? And you're going to really think we couldn't build the Great Pyramid today? You've seen machines that we have, engineers we have. Oh, come on. Of course we could build the Great Pyramid. Don't be silly.
Yeah.
We just won't.
And there you go. And that's another thing that I want to ask you about. So there are a couple of alternate theories, and this is one of the things about the pyramids especially, man, is that they're so mysterious. There are so many theories about how they were constructed, what they were for. So let's talk motive real quick. If you are talking motive, there's a couple of different explanations for this. Now, and you can probably settle this for all of us. I have heard that there are, and I want to talk about, what's his name? Hang on one second. Howard Weiss here in just a second, what he found up in the relief chambers. But to go back to motive real quick, what I've heard a lot, and there's been a lot of study done on the motives or the purpose behind the pyramids. Now, what a lot of people say is that there's no inscriptions in the pyramids, there's no carvings, and there was no mummies ever found. Therefore, it totally throws out the window the fact that they were utilized for tombs. Now, they found a box in there with, like you said, no sarcophagus lid, but there's also some resonant chamber type qualities that I know Edgar Cayce, and there's some mysticism elements to this. You've heard of the Crowley stuff about him going in there and opening portals to demons and things like that. All of these things are interesting. They're fun bedtime stories. There's also another theory about that they were power plants, that there was piezoelectricity occurring due to the aquifers underneath. And you find this with a lot of pyramids globally, again, from this allegedly unconnected society, that they build these things over aquifers. And there's an actual purpose of them having to produce power for a civilization. Then you look at things like what they found inside of one of the pyramid, or one of the tombs, I believe in Luxor, with the bulb. There's like a bulb inscription, and it looks like a light bulb with a filament in it and everything. How would they have light bulbs if they needed power? Then you look at things like the Baghdad batteries. I think that there's a lot about this ancient culture and what they were able to do technologically that was a little bit mentally out of the scope for what we understand, but that they had some great knowledge as far as being able to produce this kind of stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, my standard answer, since, you know, is that, you know what, it might have been a power plant, but it's not now. And I say that because one of the purposes, it was always there, because you know what, I do think it was a power plant. And if it wasn't a power plant, it was meant to be a model that people could study it and learn how to build a power plant. You know, Tesla, et cetera. In other words, because you can't prove if it was or it wasn't, but the schematics that people make that say it could have been, yeah, it could have been. Even Chris Dunn, you know, the things you would have to have for what he says to be true, there is absolutely no evidence anywhere of the stuff he's saying had to be there. He was hoping that those little the things that looked like copper electrodes on the doors inside the air shafts, you know, would give proof. But all the wiring and the chemicals and stuff you'd have to have for Chris Dunn's thing. And then, of course, Gattenbrink, when he studied the shafts, said there's no way they could hold water, any liquid or anything, because there's all kinds of holes in them. So there's no proof. But I think Chris Dunn has a great idea. He shows what the pyramid seems to be a schematic for this power plant. And I do think that could be one of the purposes of the Great Pyramid. I don't think it was a power plant, at least the evidence of all the stuff that would have to be there that Chris Dunn says would have to be there. It's not there. It just isn't, Chris. It's not. but it still could be a model for that. So the Great Pyramid has all kinds of purposes. That's why it's so amazing. But its main purpose was symbolic. And that's why I always say it might have been a power plant at one time, but it's not now. So I want to study it for what it still is. It was symbolic when it was built, and it still can be studied for that now. It was a power plant when it was built. Oh, but it's not now. So that's not a real good power plant if it doesn't last until now. See, what about perpetual power? What about how smart they are? Well, if they were so smart, how couldn't they make one that would last beyond into the age of the 21st century skeptical world that could show us all how it was done? They probably were smart enough to have done that, but they didn't. It's not a power plant now. It isn't. Okay. So I like to work with what it is. It's a symbolic. And of course, the ancient legends about it, they're in the Muslim world. They're in the ancient Egypt. They're in legends from the ancient past. Are that Enoch was going to build two stone pillars, and they would contain the knowledge of science at the time, the high level of science, and they would also be warnings for future catastrophes. And I believe the Great Pyramid is that one of the pillars of Enoch. It's got all the wisdom. So even though the Egyptians built it, Herodotus says that it was Philetus who got the ear of Khufu, and all the Egyptians, Herodotus was told, believed that person was the architect of the Great Pyramid. So the Romans were great builders. They mimicked the Greeks. The Romans could build, but they might have had plans that go back to, Aristotle or, even somebody from ancient Egypt. So the Egyptians were great builders, but I think the plans, the wisdom that people want to attribute these things to previous cultures, because there is a wisdom that the Egyptians used that's embedded in there, but it's not necessarily from the Egyptians. They were the builders. And so I do think that fits the idea that it was Enoch's pillar, that it encoded. Like, for instance, Carl Sagan would say, well, put the fine structure constant. If you're going to send a robot out into space and try and show people we know what we're doing, well, use the fine structure constant, which is this mysterious God number, that atomic physicists talk about. Well, as perhaps you saw, I did a recent program on the fine structure constant is in the King's chamber. It is. It plainly is. It's so obvious. It's there. So the fine structure constant, which is supposedly a culmination of all the atomic theorists, Fermi, name them all, Einstein, and now we finally get the fine structure constant. Oh, guess what? It's in the King's chamber. So there you've got what Carl Sagan said we should do. They did to us. They said, hi, we know about the fine structure constant. Okay. And so the Egyptians built that they were great builders to be able to build it there. But I think the knowledge of the fine structure constant goes back before the Egyptians. It goes back to probably Enoch and the ancient patriarchs. That would be the same wisdom that went into this monolithic, circle of the earth you're talking about, all that's built into all these ancient monuments. It's an ancient wisdom. And the building technique is our ancient passing downs too. But I think the physics and the geometry and the arithmetic is even older.
Man, I love this. And it seems like there's so much evidence out there that can be interpreted one way or another. And it seems like no matter what the evidence reveals, because like Chris Dunn says, and I think it's his theory about the chemical composition of the rocks used, of the blocks that were used, create this sort of piezoelectricity. And they demonstrated, the same thing is demonstrated by a little quartz crystal in your watch. The blocks have the same property, and therefore they kind of break things down from that way. But yes, there does seem to be just a mass puzzle here. It's like, okay, just go figure this thing out. And the way that it's laid out, when we look at the Orion connection, but this Orion connection is found globally with all kinds of things, with churches, with other monoliths that were found from other civilizations all across the world. So this lends to the idea, of course, the construction of pyramids in other places, period. That idea that says that there was a global civilization or an ancient high technology that was being utilized at this time is the reason that we see all these things interconnected. Even the deal about how they have a door and two windows, this thing in Petra, and then it's found over in Cusco as well. These interconnected type of ideas, not only the Orion connection, the fact that pyramids were built anyway. Do you think that there was an ancient global civilization that was very high technology and interconnected?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the, and of course, the way that I differ from others on that is that absolutely, there is no question that there was, there's no question. And so that's a case where the mainstream is,
yes.
blinded. Okay.
Yes.
Because there plainly was, but that doesn't mean that they built the Great Pyramid. See, that's the automatic jump to judgment. Because there was an ancient high-tech civilization, therefore they had to have built the Great Pyramid. No, they might have built other things. I don't know. I'm not a student of Göbekli Tepe. I just focus on Egypt and Giza. There's enough to keep me occupied until I die. That's where my focus is. It's the American Institute for Pyramid Research, but I say right there, the focus is Egypt. Okay, and so I just think that it was built by the Egyptians, but the wisdom that's in those ancient high-tech civilizations from the past and stuff, it worked its way in there too. So again, I do believe there was, and that's an explanation for another day. I'm working on a video on that right now. But let me jump to something else, because you asked me about using modern technology. Doing, first of all, the studies I do, you can't use a tape measure on the Giza Plateau. If you're a tourist, you can get a camera out, you can do things. And so I know, because I've been arrested before, and I learned. I said, well, there's no signs that, look at that guy's using the camera, I'm using the tape measure. What? No, you can't do that. That's okay. And so the measurements I take have to be, they have to be, like the way I measure an angle, we often just use the iPhone or use something else that's got a magnetic, maybe better than what's in the iPhone. But I'm hiding the fact that I'm taking that measurement. So that's one of the reasons that they follow me, because I say things like this and then they hear about it and they do. As a matter of fact, when I had the private entrance the last time, my tour guide, my connection in Egypt, told me that everybody knows me at Antiquities, and they're all hoping that they don't get me, because somebody from Antiquities is always assigned to someone who's been given access to the pyramid and a private entrance. They don't want to be with me because I'm going to do something, and then they're going to get in trouble because he did it while I was under their watch.
Yeah,
I'm always trying to beat the. I'm sorry. That's why I say I'm the real Indiana Jones. That's fiction, but I'm real. Like, I really do that stuff. And it's why? Because it's intellectual curiosity. It's because I know just what you've alluded to and everything you said. This is a puzzle that was placed there to be solved.
Yes.
There is a puzzle. When you look at a crossword puzzle in the New York Times, do you think that was just randomly put together? Someone spent time putting that together, and you can only solve it by spending time thinking about it. What has 6 letters and, is the same as the word lamb? You got to do that. Okay. So I know that there's encoded wisdom here, and I'm trying to find it. So if I got to kind of hide a tape measure or something, I'm going to do it, And so, and so that's the first point. You really do what I'm doing, but there are ways to do it, so I do it the ways that I can, where it does, you can't prove, hey, what do you mean? I'm taking pictures. This is my phone. You can't take my phone. I'm taking pictures like everybody else, So then when I take it to what truly are high-tech tools. For instance, this is my recent discoveries, and I still can't believe I discovered this, and this is going to have to get bigger because other people are going to see this. I did a series of videos about the Holy Shaft. Mm-hmm. Now we'll see if that name stands, because the King's Chamber, it's not really a King's Chamber, but that's the name they use in the Queen's Chamber. It's not really a Queen's Chamber, but that sticks. The trial passages, they're not really the trial passages. Mark Lehner calls them the replica passages, and there's a whole story there. Okay, so Holy Shaft. Something's going to have to name, because there's this shaft I found that's on the Giza Plateau that no one notices. It's unobtrusive. It's nothing, and it's connected to everything. It is like the pineal gland. How sexy is a pineal gland if you just look at it? There's a sloppy little bladder. There's an ugly little lizard. How sexy does a pineal? And so I found this little. And you know what? What I found is, through the modern technology we're talking about, you can measure things on Google Earth, and I'm led to believe it's a pretty accurate measurement, because the GPS that uses that measurement is the same one that keeps the car going 70 miles an hour on a California highway that has no driver in it. staying about this far apart from the car that's coming the other way. So the same technology that keeps the driverless car from hitting everything is the same GPS technology that Google Earth uses when I'm drawing their little line across there to tell me it's 59 inches, it's 58 feet, it's 47 meters. I'm connected to that same massive technology, right? So what I found is from the Holy Shaft, it's an even 100 feet to almost everything. Now, you could cherry pick a little bit. Like if I say, well, I'm going to measure from my hat, say you're sitting next to me, from my hat to your head. Well, I could measure from this part of my hat over to you. I could measure from this part of my hat over to you. Get a little different. But given that fudge factor, first of all, take into account that I said I am going to avoid that by taking the center of the Holy Shaft. So all my measurements are taken from the center. So that cuts down any fudge factor from that point. But now when I'm going to the Sphinx, so I could touch the Sphinx's tail, I could touch his head. So I want to touch a part of the Sphinx that's like, that's the Sphinx, okay? And so I found that the Holy Shaft is almost an exact 100 feet from everything. The trial passages, okay? Name any feature you're aware of on the Giza Plateau. The Osiris shaft that Brian Foster and everybody goes to, you spend the big money to take the expensive tour, and now you go down to hundreds of feet below the Giza Plateau. It's exactly 200 feet from the Holy Shaft. I mean, every major thing, that is incredible. And the way I first found it, I discovered what I called the Holy Circle. I found in Will Wire, a good graphics friend of mine, we found the circle that goes around that holy center, that holy shaft. It's exactly 888 feet to the southeast corner of Khufu. It's exactly 888 feet to the Sphinx. It's exactly 888 feet to the center of Kenkawes. And it's exactly 888 feet directly west, touching the Khafre Pyramid. What are the chances? And I did it on Google Earth too. I first realized that this was there, but then it's exactly 888 feet, and that's what led me to think, well, it's exactly 888 feet to those four major monuments on the Giza Plateau, and it's plainly the center point. I wonder what else it might be connected to, and that led me to do this thing, and I've done a couple programs on it, where it's unbelievable. So people are going to have to, it's going to be very hard to say that's coincidence, that chance, he cherry picked that. Do it yourself. Look what I did. That's a major discovery. And so one of the things that came at me, which I've never answered yet, is you saying the Egyptians knew feet because they built the pyramid in royal cubits, the 7 to 11 second, and they built it in royal cubits. As a matter of fact, oftentimes when I'm trying to figure something out, the measurements will be given me of this pyramid in meters. The Egyptologists who studied it measured it in meters. So I will convert them to royal cubits. And when I come to even numbers, I know I'm onto something because the Egyptians did build with royal cubits. Well, long story short, what Robert Grant and Alan Green and many others have shown, the meter, the foot, and the cubit are aboriginal. They're connected ontologically, and I could say more about that, but I just saw Robert Grant answer somebody. Plainly, the meter is used in the King's Chamber. And he gives examples. It's exactly, I think, 314 meters around, in other words, 3.1415. It's pi meters around the, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all kinds of examples you can show. The people who are going to say, no, it can't be, are going to really have to start fighting a lot of evidence. And so for me, it's easy to say there's an aboriginal connection, and I could explain it geometrically and stuff too. For instance, you take a 1 meter pendulum, So here's exactly 1 meter, the modern meter, swing it at 30 degrees. It swings out exactly pi over 6, because it's 30 degrees out of a 360 circle, pi over 6, which is exactly 1 royal cubit. So 1 meter swung at 30 degrees, swings out an arc of exactly 1 royal cubit. And it takes, by the way, exactly 1 second. So now it's connected to time and the rotation of the Earth. So you don't have to go far. You don't have to go far to show an ontological aboriginal connection to cubit, meter, foot. So I haven't really answered that yet to the people that say, you're saying the Egyptians knew the foot. I'm saying there's a tremendous intelligence in operation here, people. I'm not saying what the Egyptians knew, because I think it's more than them. But there's a tremendous intelligence at play here. Okay. Yeah.
Just mind-blowing. So just for clarity, what is the foot in comparison to the cubit? What's the difference size-wise?
What I always use, and this is going to depend, if you just go, pi over 6, it's 20.6 inches in a royal cubit.
Okay, so it's just shy of a foot.
Well, 20.6
inches for one cubit. Okay, just shy of 2 feet.
I didn't give you a foot royal cubit connection. I gave you an inch royal cubit connection. I mean, you can do the conversion, just divide by 12. Or,
that's right. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay, 2. Okay. What I love about the shaft that you're talking about is that this feels very Indiana Jones, doesn't it? This feels very, there is a mystery here, and you found it in a very indescript way. While other people are looking at the forest, you're seeing the trees. You're looking at the other people see the Great Pyramid. Their focus goes there, but it's kind of the Indiana Jones connection in my mind is the Holy Grail. Whenever he goes in to pick the Grail, it's not this ornate, beautiful thing. It's this crappy little cup over here. That's what, of course, it would have been. Yeah. Just like your great shaft. That is sort of the key to unlocking all the mysteries around it. It's very indescript. It's very out of the way. There's no neon signs pointing towards it, but you found it. That is Indiana Jones.
You know what really excites me along those lines, Brandon? We just talked about how yesterday or today, depending on how you count where the difference in time between Egypt and here, they moved the Khufu boat from the Giza Plateau to the new Gem Museum. Well, one of the reasons they did that, they said, because they weren't going to, the whole point was that, there were 2 boats found there right next to each other. The current solar boat pit that was just moved, that's on the east of the south side, but there was another boat found on the west part of the south side. That was the one that Bob Breyer, the Egyptologist, was working on reconstructing and doing a video about it. And then they were going to take that one to the Gem. So it'd be one at the Gem and one left at Giza. The reason they decided to take both of them, one of the reasons that Antiquity stated, was because that side of the pyramid's been off limits to everybody. And because they're building tourism, they want people. I'm so excited because one of my marks is I've learned to start interpreting this language of the markings on the north and the east side. Now the south side's going to be open to me. I'll be able to go in there and find marks that have in the providence of things and the synchronicity of things are just now going to be open. So when I go in October, that's going to be one of the places where I spend a lot of time, because I'm assuming that they'll have moved the foundations and stuff of that museum and moved it out so they can let tourist traffic go in there. Because again, that's one of their stated goals. I wouldn't have thought in the past that wouldn't have been a high goal of Antiquities to let people at the pyramid. That's almost antithetical to the way they used to think. But there's a new thinking. Think about this. The Egyptian government did the strange and wonderful thing of combining 2 departments of state that nobody else combines. You've got, on one hand, you've got the Antiquities, sifting through every grain of sand, this conservative science, don't give too much, don't let people see it, preserve the pyramid. And then on the other hand, you've got, tourism. Hey, come to Egypt. It's the greatest place in the world. So you've got the hype of tourism. They combined those 2 departments. And so now tourism and Antiquities are the same department. So what's happening is this thing is taken over now. Antiquities used to be this conservative. We can't. Zahi Hawass used to say, don't let people in the Great Pyramid. We'll just have a museum outside and they'll see it virtually. No, don't do that. And so now that they've done, they want people to come. They want people to experience Egypt. And so they want them to walk on the south side of the pyramid. So they're probably going to move all their foundations and stuff out of there so the traffic can flow around the south side of the pyramid. So that's great. I'm looking forward to looking at the marks that'll be left after they move those boat pits and stuff.
That's so exciting. And we're going to keep up with you, man. We'll probably wrap it up here, but tell me one more amazing thing. Like what just blows your mind about this complex over there in Giza?
Okay. Well, one thing, this is one of my discoveries with my friend, Bob Criley, who's an engineer, is I discovered the Hemiunu template. Now it's named after the architect of the Great Pyramid. I show his placement, his tomb is it's so just strategically located on the plateau and in relationship to the Great Pyramid. In many ways, he's showing I'm the architect of the Great Pyramid by what he did with the measurements of his own tomb and the way it's lined up with the pyramid. So the Hemiunu template is a 200 royal cubit square, a horizontal slice of the Great Pyramid. And I've discovered it. It's a long story, but it's there. It's plain there. It's not my invention. It's meant to reveal things. It's this, again, horizontal slice, a theoretical slice, 200 royal cubit square. And one of the things I found out about it is that, and 200 royal cubits is 104.7 meters. And 104.7 is an amazing number in terms of converting units and stuff, but it's 104.7. Okay, so what I found is pi divided by the speed of light is 1.047. In other words, it's 1047 meters, but it's 200 royal cubits, 1047. Okay, so pi divided by the speed of light is 1047 at the 1/10 billionth scale. Now, the reason I mention this, NASA scientists put together for the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., they've got an outdoor exhibit so you can experience the size and feel of the solar system. So it's the sun is the same distance from Pluto, which is a 15-minute walk that way, to a 1/10 billionth scale. Mercury is proportionally, and size-wise too, this size of the sun is a 1/10 billionth representation of the sun. So when Earth is this big, it's a 1/10. So the NASA scientists have used the 1/10 billionth scale to make the solar system understandable to people walking down by the National Mall. Hemiunu, whose name means human, the architect of the Great Pyramid, pi over the speed of light is 1047 to the 1/10 billionth scale.
Oh my God, that is fascinating.
As far as I know, you and me are the only people that know that, because I did a YouTube video about it. But as you'll see, my YouTube channel is pretty small. It's hard to grow independent channels these days since the Logan Paul incident, and so not many people are going to know what it is. But that's incredible.
A lot of people are about to know this, man. We have a global audience. I cannot wait to share this with everyone, and we will definitely have to have you back on. Personal note, just to add a little controversy here, it's a little on the nose, though, that his name means human. I mean, you would do that if you were an alien and your name was Alien. You'd be like, no, change his name to Human. That'll throw him off, you know?
And you know what? I don't know if his name means human. I've just learned that etymologically, so many names that, like Enoch is inch. I really believe the word inch comes from Enoch. According to legend, he's the father of metrology. So he was the original guy that meters cubits foot. So inch is encoded in his name. So I do think Enoch, inch, Hemiunu, human. If I'm wrong, oh well, who can prove it?
I mean, and with Enoch, that poor guy. I mean, if his name was Inch, that sucks. Enoch and Inch are the same thing because there's no vowels anciently. So E-N, C. Yes.
Or NCH, I should say. NCH is Enoch and it's Inch, no vowels.
I was making a dumb joke about male insecurity. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know what? Larry, you are incredible. I would love to have you back on. You're going to be my resident Egyptologist, so we'll console with you with any new discoveries. Please come back anytime, my friend. You are absolutely fantastic. If you don't mind,
I'd be glad to. Just a disclaimer, though, just so people know, I'm not an Egyptologist, even though I presented at Egyptological conferences. My degrees are in theology, education, and political science. And so those are not fields that Egyptologists, I'm not Near Eastern languages, that kind of thing. So I don't call myself an Egyptologist, but I'm certainly an independent researcher. Yes.
You're humble, and we adore you for that. You're the expert, though. We're going to come to you for this in the future. So, Larry, if you don't mind, just tell the folks where they can find you. I'll be linking all of this in the show notes as well, and then we'll bid you adieu for the day.
Okay. Bud. Yeah. Instagram, it's at Sage Silent, and YouTube, if you did as one word, the Great Pyramid AIP, because it's the American Institute of Pyramid Research. So the Great Pyramid is too many. There's too many people that have that. So the Great Pyramid AIP, and you'll find my channel. And what else do I give you? My website, greatpyramid.org.
You got the one.
I should have got .com because I was in the infancy. I could have got any name I wanted to back then, but I got .org because I'm a not-for-profit. The American Institute for Pyramid Research is a registered not-for-profit corporation in Tennessee. And so .org is the appropriate thing. So greatpyramid.org.
Wow. Well, and I know that my wife are going to be joining you on one of these trips. We've got to do this. It's on my bucket list, and now I've got somebody I couldn't imagine walking around there with anybody else other than you. So thank you so much for your time, my friend. This has been incredible. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
How about that? Larry Pahl, the real Indiana Jones, here talking about the mysteries of the Giza Plateau, which there are still plenty of. I think his research is fantastic. All the ways to find him, of course, guys, will be linked down in the show notes. Check him out on his YouTube, on his website as well. All of the stuff is linked, guys. Go check him out. Show him some love. He is fascinating and incredibly interesting. I know that y'all love this just as much as I did. These kind of mysteries just do it for me every single time. So as far as the music that you're hearing underneath this is my good buddy Vinny the Saint. He is linked down in the show notes as well. Go check him out. He's done some incredible music. He's got a bunch of new stuff up. Go show him some love for sure. It's all about love, right? Go show Larry some love. Go show Vinny some love. As far as this show goes, guys, you can find us at expandingrealitypodcast.com. That is where the links to all of the socials will be. Patreon's over there, YouTube, all of that stuff's up there, guys. So it's a one-stop hub for everything. We're working on some merchandise, so stay tuned for that. And if you have any requests, if you're like, I prefer keychains over koozies, something like that, just send them in to expandingrealitypodcast.com or contact the show directly at expandingrealitypodcast@gmail.com. Either way is fine, and you can give some input for the direction of the merchandise venue that we're working on right now. So go out into this week, guys, and check out some new stuff from Larry Pahl. He's got a bunch of new videos up that he's working on his YouTube there. Again, linked down in the show notes. Go out there and enjoy the fact that there are still mysteries around us to be solved. This is a wonderful place with a ton of really, really cool stuff that will just incite your imagination, and that's beautiful. So go out there while you're doing all of that. Don't forget to pick up a piece of litter, smile at everybody that you see and be nice, open doors, shake hands, high-fiving. I think we should bring back. Let's do that with strangers. Go out there as well and just buy a coffee or a meal of somebody in line behind you. Just do something nice. It shakes everything up. Beyond all of that, guys, go enjoy the mystery of this world and just be good to one another. Thank y'all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.